The story opens on the frozen world of Karos, a place where the storm never ends and the wind cuts like sharp glass, making survival almost impossible. Snow falls so thick that the sky disappears and the ground becomes a white desert with no clear path. In this endless blizzard, a lone alien mother named Lirath struggles forward, her body weak and tired, her steps slow and painful. She belongs to a gentle race that was never made for war, yet war has found her anyway. Only days before, her city was alive with light and voices, but the arrival of the Varn Collective turned everything into fire and death. Their machines burned the skies, crushed buildings, and hunted anyone who tried to escape. Lirath ran with her baby when the walls fell, choosing the storm over certain death, even though she knew the cold could kill them just as easily. Now she can no longer feel her feet, and her breath comes out in thin, broken clouds. She holds her child close, wrapped in torn cloth that can no longer keep the warmth in. The baby barely moves, its tiny body growing colder with every passing moment, and Lirath understands the truth she has been fighting since the escape. There will be no shelter, no help, and no miracle coming from the sky. When her legs finally give out, she falls to her knees on a small rise of ice, the storm screaming around her as if mocking her pain. Tears freeze on her face as she looks down at her child, knowing these may be the final moments they share. With shaking hands and a breaking heart, she begins to sing, not because she believes it will save the baby, but because it is the last gift she can give. The song is old, passed from mother to child for generations, a soft promise of warmth, peace, and rest beyond suffering. Her voice is weak, almost swallowed by the wind, yet it carries all her love, fear, and sorrow. Each word feels like a goodbye, and as she sings, her strength fades along with her hope. The storm remains cruel and uncaring, but something strange happens within its noise. A new sound joins the wind, heavy and steady, like footsteps crushing snow. At first, Lirath believes the cold is playing tricks on her mind, but then a dark shape appears through the white wall of the blizzard. It walks upright, moving with purpose instead of fear. A deep voice cuts through the storm, rough but alive, asking if anyone is there. The song stops as Lirath looks up in shock, her heart racing with confusion and sudden hope. The figure steps closer, and she sees strange armor covered in ice, broad shoulders, and eyes that shine with determination instead of hunger or cruelty. This is no Varn machine and no creature of the storm. It is a human, a being she has only heard of in distant stories, now standing before her in the worst place imaginable. As the blizzard rages on, the moment feels unreal, like a dream born from despair, yet the human's presence is warm, solid, and real. In a place where death seems certain, a stranger has arrived, and with him comes the first fragile spark of hope that refuses to die. The second part of the story follows the human stranger and reveals who he is and why his arrival feels almost impossible. His name is Eli Warren, a human captain who should have died when the battle over Karos went wrong. High above the frozen world, human ships fought the Varn Collective in a desperate attempt to protect fleeing civilians, and during that fight Eli's ship was torn apart by enemy fire. His escape pod fell through fire and smoke, crashing far from any safe zone and leaving him alone on a planet that wanted him dead. When he crawled out of the wreckage, the storm greeted him with freezing wind and endless white, and every system in his armor warned him that survival chances were low. His leg was injured, his visor cracked, and his power supply was failing, yet he chose to move instead of waiting for death. For 2 long days he walked through the blizzard, guided by old maps, weak signals, and a stubborn will that refused to give up. He remembered the people he had promised to protect and the reason humans had come to this distant world, and those thoughts pushed him forward when his body wanted to fall. During one of the darkest hours, when the storm grew louder and the cold felt sharper, A sound reached his ears that did not belong to the wind. It was soft and broken, but filled with emotion, and it pulled him in like a light in the dark. He followed that sound, fighting through snow that reached his knees, until he found the alien mother collapsed on the ice with her child held close. Seeing them shocked him, not because they were aliens, but because the pain on her face was the same pain he had seen on countless humans during the war. He scanned the baby with his suit and saw how close death already was, and there was no time to think or plan. Ignoring the warning screaming inside his helmet, he opened his armor and pulled the small body against his own chest, letting his warmth flow into the child even as the cold cut into him. The suit protested, flashing danger signs, but Eli pushed them aside, choosing the child's life over his own safety. The alien mother looked at him with fear and confusion, unable to understand why a stranger from another world would risk everything for her child. When she asked him why he was helping, his answer was simple and honest: because someone had to, and because humans did not turn away when life was in front of them and needed saving. In that moment, Eli was not a captain or a soldier, but a person making a choice. He wrapped the mother in his spare thermal cover and signaled a weak beacon, knowing that Varn patrols could detect it, yet believing that standing still meant death for all of them. The storm continued to roar around them, but the baby's breathing slowly grew stronger, proving that the warmth was working. Eli stayed awake despite his pain, watching the horizon and holding his weapon ready, prepared to fight or die if the enemy appeared. This part of the story shows that human strength does not come only from weapons or ships, but from stubborn hope, quick action, and a deep refusal to accept loss as the final answer, even in the coldest and darkest place imaginable. The third part of the story moves away from the frozen ground and opens up to the wider war that burns across the stars, showing how large and dangerous the conflict truly is. The Varn Collective has ruled through fear for a long time, moving from system to system with massive fleets and cold, perfect machines, believing that no species would dare to stand against them for long. Many worlds have already fallen, their skies filled with fire as cities were erased and survivors hunted down. When humanity answered the call for help, the Varn expected another weak enemy that would break under pressure. Instead, they found something they did not understand. Human ships were not the biggest or the most advanced, but they were fast, flexible, and filled with crews who learned quickly from every loss. In the dark space above Karos, the battle rages as stars disappear behind clouds of fire and drifting metal. Lasers tear across the void, missiles chase glowing targets, and the silence of space is filled with destruction. On the bridge of the human flagship, Admiral Rias watches the enemy lines with calm eyes, fully aware that her fleet is outnumbered and slowly being pushed back. She does not panic, because humans have learned that survival often comes from using the enemy's strength against them. Orders move through the fleet, and human pilots prepare for a move that looks like desperation but is built on careful thought. Hidden squadrons launch from quiet corners of space. Small attack ships packed with extra fuel, strange weapons, and daring pilots who know the risks. They rush straight into the heart of the Varn formation, not trying to win through power, but through confusion and speed. Mines are dropped behind enemy lines, systems are hacked, and some ships fly so close that shields scrape against armor. Explosions bloom like deadly flowers, breaking the clean order of the Varn fleet and forcing them to react instead of command. On the surface of Karos, the war is just as brutal, with towering Varn walkers marching through ruined cities, scanning for movement in the snow. Human ground teams use the storm as cover, hiding in ice and shadows, striking fast, and vanishing before the enemy can respond. Every step is dangerous, and every victory costs blood, yet the humans keep moving forward. Reports reach the Varn commanders that humans are refusing to retreat even when surrounded, turning wreckage into traps and snow into a shield. This confuses. The collective, which has always believed fear would break any foe. Instead of surrender, humans answer loss with louder resistance and sharper attacks. The battles are not clean or heroic, but desperate and real, fought by people who know they might not return. Through all of this, one truth becomes clear across the battlefield, spreading from ship to ship and soldier to soldier like a shared belief. Humanity is not fighting for control or pride, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves, and that purpose gives them strength far greater than numbers. As space burns and the ice world shakes, the war over Kairos becomes more than just another conquest attempt. It becomes a test of will, and for the first time, the Varn Collective begins to face an enemy that does not fear them, an enemy that adapts, endures, and refuses to fall, no matter how high the cost. The fourth part of the story returns to the frozen surface of Kairos and focuses on the dangerous journey of Eli, Lerath, and the fragile child as the war closes in around them. After the first moment of rescue, there is no time to rest, because the storm hides many threats and the enemy is always searching. Eli knows that remaining in one place will only end in death, so he pushes forward, carrying the baby close to his chest while guiding Lerath through the deep snow. The child's weak breath slowly grows steadier as warmth flows from Eli's body, giving a small sign of hope in a world that has offered nothing but cruelty. The wind howls around them, erasing tracks almost as soon as they form, but the storm also gives cover, hiding them from distant eyes. This fragile safety breaks when a sharp red light cuts through the white sky, hovering above the snow like a hunting eye. A Varn drone has found them, its cold machine mind scanning for life. Plasma fire crashes into the ice nearby, sending shards of frozen ground flying through the air. Eli reacts without panic, pulling Lerath toward a narrow ravine while firing back, his shots striking the drone and forcing it to spiral down in flames. The victory is brief, because more enemy signals appear through the storm, heavy footsteps and dark shapes moving with purpose. The hunters are coming, and they will not stop. Eli knows that a long fight will only bring more danger, so he uses the land itself as a weapon. He plants explosive charges along the edge of the ravine and leads the group forward, his injured legs screaming with pain as he runs. When the Varn pursue, the charges erupt, collapsing ice and snow into the ravine and burying the hunters under tons of frozen earth. The ground shakes, and the storm swallows the sound, leaving only silence behind. With no time to look back, Eli guides Lerath toward an old human emergency beacon, half buried in the snow and damaged by earlier fighting. He repairs it with shaking hands, sending out a short signal that might attract allies or enemies, knowing the risk but seeing no other choice. The waiting feels endless as the storm thickens and Eli's strength fades. Yet he remains standing, weapon ready, body shielding the mother and child. At last, the sound of engines cuts through the wind, loud and powerful, and a human dropship bursts from the clouds, its guns firing into the snow to clear the landing zone. The blast of heat and light feels unreal after so much cold and darkness. As they are pulled aboard, Ale finally allows himself to breathe, though his body is shaking from pain and exhaustion. He looks back through the open ramp at the endless white storm below, knowing how close death had been at every step. The dropship lifts away, leaving behind the frozen battlefield and the enemy buried beneath the ice. This part of the story shows how survival often depends on quick choices, courage under pressure, and the will to protect others even when every path forward is filled with danger, proving once again that humanity does not simply fight its enemies, but fights the impossible itself. The fifth part of the story rises to the highest point of danger and shows the true cost of the war above Kairos, where everything is decided in a single brutal clash. In orbit, the battle grows more violent as the Varn Collective pushes forward with its largest and most powerful ship. a massive flagship that blocks out the stars and moves with cold confidence. This vessel carries a planet-breaking weapon, a tool designed to end resistance in one final act by shattering the world below. Human sensors detect the charge building, and the truth spreads quickly through the fleet that if the weapon fires, Karos will die along with every remaining survivor. On the bridge of the human flagship, Admiral Rhea studies the data without fear, fully understanding that there is no safe move left. Retreat would mean surrender and the loss of countless lives, so she prepares her fleet for a final stand. Orders flow through damaged ships and exhausted crews, calling for full power, close attack runs, and absolute commitment. Human pilots answer without hesitation, knowing many of them will not return, yet choosing to fight anyway. Engines roar as human ships surge forward, racing toward the enemy giant through walls of plasma fire and exploding debris. Smaller craft slip through gaps in the Varn defenses, striking at shield nodes and weapon ports, while heavier ships draw enemy fire away from the most vulnerable targets. Space becomes a storm of light and destruction, filled with burning wrecks and broken hulls drifting silently into the dark. The human flagship takes repeated hits, its shields failing section by section, yet Admiral Reyes refuses to pull back. She directs her ship straight toward the heart of the enemy formation, using its remaining power to disrupt the charging weapon. When a devastating blast tears through the flagship's side, alarms scream and systems fail, but the crew stays at their stations, holding the line through sheer determination. In a final act of defiance, the human fleet focuses all remaining fire on the Varn weapon core, overloading it beyond control. The massive enemy ship shudders, its perfect design breaking apart as energy surges tear through its structure. Admiral Reyes gives one last calm order to ensure the attack continues, even as her own ship becomes engulfed in fire. Moments later, the Varn flagship explodes in a blinding flash, destroying the planet-killer weapon before it can fire. The shockwave ripples through space, damaging nearby ships and forcing the remaining Varn fleet into chaos. Without their strongest weapon and leadership, the Varn finally break formation and retreat, choosing survival over conquest for the first time in their history. The cost of victory is heavy, marked by lost ships, lost crews, and the destruction of the human flagship, yet the planet below remains whole. This part of the story shows that humanity's greatest strength is not power or numbers, but the willingness to stand firm when defeat seems certain, to sacrifice everything so that others may live, and to turn impossible odds into a moment of lasting hope. The final part of the story moves away from battle and destruction and focuses on what remains after the storm has passed, showing the meaning of survival and the quiet power of hope. With the Varn fleet driven away, Karos slowly begins to heal, even though the scars of war remain clear across its frozen lands. Wreckage burns in the distant sky, and broken cities stand silent beneath falling snow, yet life has not ended. Human ships return with supplies, medical teams, and builders, landing where once only fire and fear existed. Temporary shelters rise from the ice, glowing with warmth and light, offering safety to those who survived. Among them is Lirath, resting in a small human-built home where the cold cannot reach her anymore. In her arms, her child sleeps peacefully, breathing strong and steady, alive because someone refused to turn away in the storm. The memory of that night still feels unreal to her, like a dream shaped by fear and miracle. Yet every heartbeat of her child proves it was real. Eli visits often, no longer wearing armor but still carrying the marks of the journey in the way he walks and the quiet look in his eyes. He watches the snow fall beyond the window and listens as Lirath sings softly to her child, the same song that was once meant as a goodbye now filled with warmth and promise. She tells him that the song was never meant to save a life, only to comfort one at the end. Yet somehow it became a call that crossed species and war. Eli answers simply, saying that humans hear pain in the dark and move toward it, even when the path is dangerous. Across Karos and beyond, the story spreads among survivors and fleets, carried by words and memory rather than official reports. It is not told as a tale of great ships or powerful weapons, but as a moment when kindness stood against cruelty and refused to lose. The Varn Collective does not return, and though the war is not fully over in the galaxy, something has changed within it. Worlds that once stayed silent begin to believe that resistance is possible, and that humanity is not just another force of destruction, but a shield willing to stand between the weak and the abyss. The loss of the human flagship and its crew is honored in quiet ceremonies, the sacrifice remembered not as an end, but as a foundation for new alliances and shared strength. As time passes, Karos begins to feel less like a battlefield and more like a home again, where humans and aliens work side by side beneath the endless snow. The final image is not one of war, but of peace, with a mother's song drifting through a warm room while the storm rages harmlessly outside. This ending shows that true victory is not only found in defeating an enemy, but in protecting life, building hope from ruin, and proving that even in the coldest darkness, compassion can become the strongest force in the galaxy.